Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I wasn't going to film this, which is why I'm halfway through before the video actually starts. I wasn't going to bother, but I am for some reasons that are different. It's not just your standard repotting this time. Now, both of these plants Hannah bought for me, part of my Father's Day present, and lucky we got a discount. But these are Dendrobium Cuthbertsonii, and I've been after some for a while. I nearly got some at the RHS show, but somebody just got there before me apparently, so I was told. These are genuine miniatures. Now they have a spreading habit and will form like a dome, but these are tiny little plants. These are flowering size. That had a flower on it, but it fell off, so at least I've seen the colour. And that one is actually got a name. It's Cuthbertsonii variety Pepe. Yeah, so that's actually got a registered name. And this could be a registered name, but although this bloom's gone, I left it on there and didn't pull it off, just literally to show you the size of the bloom relative to the size of the plant, which is why I've been after some of these. They come in all colours, from very pale pinks through all the pinks to purples, and from pale yellows through the yellows, oranges, into quite deep reds. So you can actually have quite a collection of these, but what's special about them is the leaves. They're really heavily textured. I don't know how close I can get before that goes out of focus, but if I push it in and then pull it back slowly, they're heavily textured. And they're quite attractive in their own right. But as I said, these are flowering size plants. You can get some even smaller than this and some slightly larger, but you'll never get a big one, not in pseudobulb size. Now what's special about these is they grow in moss. They're not found growing hardly anywhere else. So yes, on branches, fallen trees, trunks, rocks, and even on the surface of the ground in leaf litter. But what's special about them is they grow in moss. If the moss isn't there, nor are these. So that makes them a bit special. So just sticking them in bark and sphagnum is not going to be good enough for these, in my opinion. Don't forget, this is me interpreting what I read. But the first thing I need to do is, they were in that rubbish, and this stuff smells. That is not your natural moss smell. So they've been in there a while, and this is Equigenera. I've always had my doubts and worries, and that was emphasised at Malvern this year. They're rummage bins, as I like to call them, because it is literally, all the plants have to be effectively bare rooted, so how they even got away with this I don't know, but the plants are sort of wrapped in possibly some moss and then wrapped up in stuff and then wrapped, and that's what you get. And so they're sort of always long and thin, the plant and what roots you may have, and then what they're wrapped in is kept damp, and practically all of those plants this time had mould growing on what they were wrapped in. And I don't know how long that's been there, how much damage that will have done to the root base, but if anybody bought any of those, I would suggest you pot them now and you give them one hell of a clean up, because mould spores can migrate. So once you see mould, once you see the bluey green stuff growing on things like paper, that's an active form. That's not the spores, you can't see them. So there could be spores over the whole thing that haven't yet developed their colour. So take care. I've always had my worries about this lot, which is why I very rarely buy from them. I've got a Laelia out in the grow room that's growing on great guns, and that was got at the Malvern show, and there was no mould on the wrapping or anything at that time, and it did have some roots and it did have some new growths, and it's taken off like a rocket. So I was just, that little dark piece there looked like it had legs for a minute. It was about to become very flat. But this little plant and this little plant were in this sort of moss that was totally bone dry. It had been allowed to go crispy dry. These grow in moss. Do they ever dry out? Do they hell? Anyway, I have one with a good root system. I will wash every bit of this moss out, give the plant a thoroughly good clean, and likewise with this one, which doesn't look that happy, but these are new growths coming off this bulb, and at the moment they don't look too bad. The bulb with the flower on is actually black. I'm not sure what to do with this one. I'm going to clean it and plant it and see what grows from it, and keep a very close eye on it, because if there's any mold spores or anything left on this plant, the way I'm actually going to pop this up, it's only going to make it worse. Anyway, I will give them a thorough clean up, but as I said, you can see the type of leaves. That's why I've been after them. That leaf's even broken, a bit of damage, I think. It may just be how they are. Yeah, they are. They do tend to be a little loose on the bulbs. And the size of the blooms, and these grow into quite a nice dome shape, you know, once they take off and get going a bit, which this one could well do quite quickly. This one will take time, and I just hope it makes it as it's at present. You know, it's important. So I'll have a clean up and everything like that, and then I'll come back and show you how I'm going to actually pot these up. Right, phase one. Tools, essential coffee. I don't usually do repotting in the morning, but right, I've got what is effectively a drip tray at the moment, my scissors, which have got a nice point on, sharp screwdriver, slightly bigger screwdriver, and slightly bigger screwdriver. You can tell where this is going, can't you? And I've got a jiffy bag for padding, because I don't want to make holes in my worktop, but what I do want to do is make holes in the base of this tray, which I'm hoping this will do without splitting. And I want quite a few of them, because I do want drainage. I don't want water puddling in the bottom of this, so I might get away with just a ring of small holes, but I think I need bigger holes than this, because I am going to put some media in here, and obviously that can clog the holes. So we'll go round and make a ring of holes around the outside, and we'll make another lot. As I say, this is I'm winging this. I haven't seen anybody else play around like this. So I'm making this up as I go along, based on what I believe the plant needs. I'll stick one in the middle for good luck. Makes a pretty pattern, doesn't it? And the idea is to gradually make these holes bigger. And this is the bit I'm not sure is going to work. I think I might need to try doing that with the scissors, because they've obviously got a cutting edge. Preferably not on my finger. Yeah, that's doing a much better job. As I said, with media in the bottom of this tray, I don't want these holes getting clogged. I want them plenty big enough to allow water to run out. It doesn't matter if it hangs in there for a short space of time, but given that my plants and trays and things live on open shelves, not on like metal trays or anything like that, they're open to the air underneath, which does allow air to get in and water to get out. And there's another problem with these plants. Well, not a problem, because it's surmountable. They're cool growers. They're not warm growers. So these are going to have to go in a separate place in my grow room. Not normal for dendrobiums. Right, that's got some good sized holes in the bottom. What it looks like doesn't matter that much because it's obviously going to get covered up in a minute. Thank you. Trouble with sharp tools. And that's very rough underneath. I don't know whether the scissors will carve those burrs off. Yeah, they will. Actually, that would be better done with a sharp knife, I think. I'll just take these burrs off. Now, all it's doing really is filling the holes back in. So if I try running the knife round from this side, where the burrs are, it should slice them off. Taking a bit more care this time not to get my fingers in the way underneath. I've already got one hole in my finger. Not quite deep enough to produce the old red stuff, but it wasn't far off. I'll live. This is not working as well as I was hoping, but it is working. You can see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to make some nice open, clear holes to allow water to escape quickly. Getting there slowly but surely. I wasn't planning on having the holes probably quite this large, but it's not going to do any harm. I want the water to get out and quickly. And these are going to need some different care to the other dendrobiums. If they live in moss, what happens to moss if it gets dry? It dies and goes brown. And there's a nice tip which I noticed a lot of at Malvern. If you're going to use moss on your displays, make sure it's nice and fresh and green, and that you keep it moist so that it stays nice and fresh and green. There was an awful lot of brown moss on some of those displays and it really does look tatty. So if you're going to have moss on a display, be prepared to have new moss that's nice and bright and green, has been looked after for probably a month or more prior to being used, kept nice and moist in the shade, nice and green, and then when you use it, it looks fabulous. But tatty old brown stuff that's drying does not look so good. There you go, all you show committee people and show committee bosses. If you could decide to use moss, make sure it's nice and green and fresh, and make sure you've got a sprayer with plenty of suitable water to keep it nice and moist. It's a 3-day event, Malvern, you know, and a lot of the setup was done on Wednesday. You've got moss, that moss has got to stay nice and bright and green and fresh till Sunday. And then if you've looked after it well, you can keep it ready for next time. Anyway, that's relatively flat on the bottom now. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's all going to get covered up in a minute anyway. But anyway, we've got plenty of drainage there now, plenty. So that's phase 1. That's looks big for the plant, yeah, but if you have a closer look at the plant that's going to go in that one, that's got quite an extensive root system. Now another thought, this is all supposition. I haven't read this anywhere, I don't know this and nobody's told me, but if these grow on branches and possibly rocks in moss, what's their root system going to do? Is it going to be a deep-rooted plant? No, it's not. It's going to have a spreading root system. And if I want to make a spreading root system out of this plant, I do actually need quite a large tray. So that's the reasoning behind having what looks like much too big a tray. But once you start spreading the roots out, you know, think about it. Solid piece of wood covered in moss with a plant sat on it. those roots are just going to spread over through the moss down onto whatever, wood, rock, yeah, bark, and they're going to spread low and flat. Yeah, this isn't sphagnum moss we're talking about. This is the type of moss that, you know, grows on trees and logs and in moist places. You've been there, you've seen what I mean, and it's quite shallow. So all these roots are going to be shallow. So that's number one done. The other one's going to get done the same. I won't film the other one. I'll come back when I'm ready to actually pot these. If you can call that potting. Okay, let's see what we can do then. We'll start with a smaller one and build up. I want a base layer of media in the bottom of these trays with no big pieces in, just very, very small. That's why I'm picking over the stuff, bits of stick and stuff that you get in this Orchid. That'll be more than enough for one tray. And to that I'm going to break up some sphagnum moss, very, very small. I do not want big pieces. Everything to do with this to be small. Try and represent the sort of environment that I'm assuming these roots live in. I've never gone out in the wild and found one of these, so I don't know. I've seen plenty of pictures of the sort of environment, and like I said, they tend to grow in what is short moss. I mean, they're tiny little plants. If it was the sort of moss that grew to any height, it'd just swamp the plant. So it's obvious a plant that size sits on top of very short cropped moss. Otherwise it would just get swamped. I mean, a lot of our native orchids are in a similar position. You know, they only grow sort of 6 inches tall. Well, they're not going to do very well in grass that's 2 feet tall, are they? So they tend to grow where the turf is incredibly short, either through sheer lack of nutrients or combination of that and grazing. But if the turf isn't kept short, they just die out eventually. They can't compete. And that's that. And to this, I'm going to actually add some perlite. I don't usually use perlite. The reason is that in clear pots it collects algae and goes green and doesn't look too good. It seems to almost promote algae, but this is going in the dark. So it doesn't matter, and it does help. This is effectively sponge rock, which is giant perlite, and I don't want giant pieces, I just want some in here. If you handle this perlite stuff, watch the dust, won't you? It doesn't do you any good at all if you breathe that in. I don't want a lot, I just want some in there to just help aerate the media. The last thing I want is this media getting stale. Now obviously these will probably be incredibly easy to repot, so I'm just going to rinse that dust off my hands. There's no good saying it and then not doing it, is it? Right, now we can't obviously stake anything or do anything other than plonk the plant on the top of the media. And I want a layer of this that's enough for some roots to get in, but I don't want too much. I just want some base to the where the plant's going to sit. I think that's actually deep enough. I have to go incredibly careful watering, and then my plan is to then sit the plant. So I've just seen there's a stiff woody bit sticking downwards there. If I don't take that off, it's not going to sit in the tray very nice, so I'm just going to trim that sort of woody stem. Some roots came off with that, but that was a really old part of the plant. And then my idea is to lay the plant flat, spread the roots out as best I can over the top of that, and then we're actually going to put some live moss on the top. The real stuff, the real McCoy. Now this is going to be fiddly, because this is not the finest of moss. It's actually quite coarse, but it does grow quite flat once it gets poked down, And what I can do with this is, if it does start to get a bit long and sort of sprout up higher than the plant itself, it can be trimmed. And then the moss itself will branch and become thicker. So, you know, this is a totally different ball game here to anything else. It is very, very different. Reason being, looking at where these grow and how they grow, they are different. So they're going to get treated different. As I said, this moss is live moss, so you know this will continue to grow. There are some weeds in it, but again, the way this is going to get watered, the weeds will grow quite quickly, and then they can just be pulled out because they'll have nothing to hang on to. So gradually it will become weed free as I work on it. And as I said, as this moss starts to grow, if it starts to look as though it's taking over, it can just be trimmed. And the idea is that the moss covers all the roots so that they're not exposed, because they obviously shouldn't dry out. So again, totally different to a lot of other dendrobiums, which quite actually like to dry out in between watering. And some of them, if you don't do it, they won't grow properly. But these are different. Constantly moist, very heavy humid environment, and cool. I haven't got anything else that really grows like that in the dendrobium field. So that's it. And guess what else I can't do? Can't put a tag on it. It doesn't matter. At the moment I only have 2. They will go in my notes with their name. And the plants are obviously different. You know, these have got darker leaves, these have got lighter leaves, so I'll know which one's which, even as they grow on. So that's it. That's all I'm going to do with that. The roots are sat under moss and on some media that's about to get a good watering, which has also got some chopped sphagnum in it, and some perlite, and some bark that will also hold moisture. So that's it. That's what it's going to grow in, on and around. So that's that one. That's the little one. Let's have a go at the bigger one. And the reason I've got a much bigger tray is that it has actually got not a bad root base on it, and when I spread it out, it's going to reach the edges of this tray, so it's already going to have its root system filling the tray at the start point. But if I use the next size tray up, I'd class that as over potting, if you can actually call this potting. As I say, I've never done anything like this. I mean, bulbophyllums grow really nicely in trays as well, and they quite like live moss on the top, on the surface. I think Anna Maria is having a go with some live moss on some of her pots. I haven't done it before deliberately. It's happened by accident. You know, where some moss spores have actually been in around the roots of a plant, and the roots obviously weren't immaculately cleaned, and as a consequence the moss got a hold and actually started to grow. So I mean, it does happen occasionally. Not to be confused with this type of sphagnum moss that goes green. That's algae. It's not zombie moss. It's not coming back to life just because it looks green. This stuff's dead. Ceased to be. How's that looking? I don't want this too deep. I want enough roots to have something more substantial to get into than what at the moment is loose moss. As that moss grows, it will thicken up and compact, but it's not going to do that for a while. Moss is not normally known for fast growing, that's for sure. Right, so that's the base, and then with this one, not with that bit or with that bit, this has got a spreading, well, it will have when I've done it. It's got a root system that I can spread out very well in this tray and get the root into many places. I don't want any hanging out, I don't want any aerial roots, not on a plant that grows this way. That's it, nicely spread out. Then we'll try and find some nice bits of green again. See, even my tray of moss is going to have to recover from this because I'm taking all the green tops off. So it'll just sprout out again. although it might look a bit brown when I've finished because I've taken the bright green bits off, it will soon shoot out again and turn green. It won't if it dries out, that's for sure. I've just found some different moss. Can you see the difference? Yeah? Now that would be a more suitable moss if I had a lot of it, but I haven't. It's just a few bits that got mixed up in here when I collected it. It's mainly the more fibrous stuff. But as I said, if that starts shooting skywards and taking over, then it can just be trimmed, just like a lawn, just like you would a lawn, just trim the tops off. And then they'll branch and it'll get thicker as time goes on. And boy, is this going to provide a lot of humidity. I have to go very careful watering it that I don't wash everything out. I've just seen some more of that fine moss, we'll have that. Get that in there. I don't want any gaps, I don't want to see that you know, ordinary media. I don't want to actually see any of that. I want a nice green platform. I tell you something else that could grow this way would be the Lodigessii. That tends to like to crawl over the ground. That would grow on a flat tray like this with the canes touching, possibly just pinned down to hold them. And then all those little plantlets would, the roots on those plantlets would grow properly instead of having aerial roots and just about hanging on, which is all they do normally. I think that's probably going to do it. I'm just going to see if I can find some more of that fine moss and tuck a few bits in, because I'd quite like that to take over. There are only a few pieces in here, but we'll have them. Not that easy to spot in amongst the other stuff, but they're there. See, now there's a nice little piece of it. You see the difference? That's the fibrous, you know, more stuff, and this is the fine stuff. So any of that I can see, I just want to put on the top, because that will grow short and flat and far more compact, more suited to a root system really. Just had an idea. The fact that I've now realised that I do like that sort of moss, well, how about going and getting some of that then? See if I can find somewhere where it grows on its own. Because when I collected this, it all came from exactly the same place, and at the time I didn't realise there were two types of moss in there. So, you know, this is like a bonus. But I'm sure I can find somewhere where that finer grade moss grows alone without the fibrous stuff. I can't see much more of it. There's a little bit there. So there we go. Those are they. That's how I've decided to do them. There's no instructions anywhere. Nobody else has done a video on Cuthbertsonii being planted in this way, I don't suspect. And who knows, it might not even work. But the theory behind it is sound. Pictures of these growing in the wild, looking at the environment, and looking at the way they grow, I can't see this failing. So we will give it a go. But the one thing that mustn't happen with these plants is this pot allowed to be dry, because the moss will die and then it serves no purpose. So there we go, two little Dendrobium Cuthbertsonii. Updates will follow. I just hope both the moss and the plants now take off. Plants were what I'll call chemically cleaned. They had the hydrogen peroxide sprayed into every nook and cranny. As I said with the Ecuagenera plants, this time round there was a lot of evident mould around, and I'm sure when they pack them up and move on to the next show they all just get bundled up together. So those moss spores are going to be everywhere. So I'm confident there would have been some on these little plants. So good thorough cleaning, and we'll see how they go. Now, as I said, these are cool growers. Remember when I was filming the grow space and said I've got lots of spare shelves, and I've got one completely open shelf now with nothing on it that's right next to the inlet fan. Well, guess where these are going to go? Right down near the floor. And I might move some of my other cool growers onto that shelf as well. So there we go then, something a bit different. Let's hope it works. Everything crossed. See you next time.